Hello everyone, welcome to chapter 93 on my RLDR Custom Creations YouTube channel. If you would like to be able to make something cool like this, all you've got to do is stay tuned. Well, this is a pretty cool project. This is something I used to do with my grade 7 students when I taught in high school or middle years. And it's a really cool project. Many years ago, I decided that traditional intarsia was a little bit too difficult for my students to engage in. When you had two different colored woods and you had pieces on each piece of wood and you had to cut to make that fit, yeah, some of my students would have mastered that, but I had larger groups and I didn't have that kind of time to spend with individual students. So I needed to find something that made it so the cutting didn't matter quite as much. And I didn't get ideas from the internet, but I know that there's a segmented type of intarsia that's done, or it's not really intarsia. But I call this modified intarsia. What I do with this is, and I'll explain it all in what's coming up in the video, but just a quick summary basically. I make a pattern, and this is all cut out of MDF and then painted, but it all comes out of one board. So coming out of one board, it means that if you make a mistake cutting along a line, it goes into the other piece and everything still fits tightly at the end, although albeit not exactly the way the pattern was. However, for my students to have something that looked appealing, if it wasn't exactly like the pattern, usually I and them were the only ones that ever knew that, because if you didn't have access to the pattern to absolutely compare, you'd never know. So my grade 7s were very successful over the years. Eventually, I think I made about 50 different project plans, mostly based on Disney characters. Back in the day, I wasn't concerned about marketing plans or anything like that. This is the first one that I drew by myself. So I used a 6-inch end cap for this one to make the circle. And yeah, this is me. Is there other things like it on the internet? Probably. It's not brand new. So this pattern, when I get it completed and it's close, will go on Teacher Pay Teacher. And my site there is the same as my YouTube channel name, RLDR Custom Creations. So sit tight, and I'm going to go through explaining the whole process to you. It's a little bit longer, but if you decide to do something like this with the instruction that I'm going to give you in the upcoming video, you should have no trouble completing this. So let's get into the how-to part. The first thing that you need to do when you're contemplating making one of those modified intarsia projects that I showed you in the last, or the video, not the last video, the one before, was you need a pattern. Now, this is a pattern that I actually drew. This is mine, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in depth later, but I want to show you what completed patterns look like first. Now, you don't necessarily have to make your own pattern. You could use intarsia patterns. They'd work really well. And then you could download those and cut those out. This is something that I did for my students at school. They like to do Disney characters. We did some Pokemon. I got an education in what was current with my kids at the time. Now you'll notice this one has the raising unit numbers on it. So this piece here, this R1, would have a 1/8 piece of probably scrap, well, Well, scrap whatever, but probably with that 1/8 inch hardboard that I used for the backer. So it would get one of those glued underneath, and then that would raise it from the what's around it. So there's an R1 here and R1 there, and there's nothing there. So these two pieces would stick out a bit. This whole forehead is R2. So that's two raising units, so that's a 1/4 inch. You could put 2/8 behind, but if you have 1/4 inch material, and this can be any scrap, doesn't need to be perfect. Also, I have the color of paint on here as well. And this is what I would call a much more complete pattern. A really, really well done pattern. I need to go back to my original, and that's Gainer. This pattern is very well done, very complete, and that's what I like to cut with. So did I make these up? Are these my patterns? I don't treat them as mine because I went from another source. So technically, I guess I've copied some of it. Have I changed enough of it to make it copyright free? I don't know. But anyway, I'm not going to worry about that because the new generation, sorry, I'm off camera here. The new generation is this. This pattern I drew from scratch. So I came out to the shop one Sunday afternoon and just drew it. Yeah, I looked at a picture of the face a little bit and just so I could see what needed to be there. And then I just drew. Some of it's circles that I had in the shop, different size pipe and things like that, because apparently I don't have a compass. But most of it's drawn freehand. And once I've got the sketch the way I want it, sometimes the straight lines, I'll take a ruler and go back over them just to make sure they're straight. So this pattern is mine. But notice I have none of the other information on it yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this all out, and then I'm going to play with different raising pieces to see what looks good. Often in the past, I just try to visualize it on paper, but I found, in fact, when I do this with kids, I give them a pattern like this to cut, and then I have little pieces of R1, R2, and R3, and they put it under where they want it, and they decide the raising. So that's been another innovation. It allows the kids to have more input, or your person doing this to have more input into their final creation. So anyway, this is what I drew, and the next step would be putting it on what you're going to cut. Now, I'm just going to show this close up, and then I'm going to sit down again. This is 3/8 MDF. I used to, when I was in the school, I always used 1/2 inch. 3/8 cuts a little easier, and it works good, but I think I paid more for 3/8 MDF than I would for 1/2. So I will probably go back to 1/2 inch, but either one is great. It has no bearing on the pattern or the raising or anything. So what I like to do is take a scissor and cut the excess of the pattern off. Then draw a line roughly around where you want the pattern to be. And I have found that Elmer's glue stick works to hold these on. I used to use rubber cement, like the paper style rubber cement. I don't think it's the tire repair stuff. And that worked good. We went through bottles and bottles of that in the school shop, but this is readily available because rubber cement's getting hard to find. This is readily available and it's cheap. This is Dollarama glue. It's Elmer's. So what I did is I put a layer of glue on the back of the paper and on the face of the wood. And then I just let it tack up a little bit. And when you put it on, just make sure that it goes out smoothly. Like, take your hand and smooth it out nicely. Try not to have any ripples or cuts. And if it isn't working out, just pull it off and do it again. If it's really on tight and you're not sure what to do, just flip the piece over. It doesn't really matter. But now, when the pattern's on, you're ready to go to the saw. and start cutting. So I would go to the saw, and I'm going to actually demonstrate some of this, but I'm going to maybe bring you in a little bit closer for that. I would cut the outside first and then cut the inside. So I'm going to move you in a little closer, and when I'm cutting, I will bring you back. Well, now we're at the cutting stage. When you cut these out, what you have to really watch for is, especially if you're doing it with students, and even if you're doing it on your own, you want to be careful for this. You want to cut many of your smaller pieces before you cut some of the larger pieces, because the one thing you really want to avoid is having a little piece that needs to be cut out when you have nothing to hold on to. So always make sure that you're planning your cuts in such a way that you have something to hold on to saw safely, rather than, cut everything out and end up with, like I said, two little pieces at the end. So what I would do first with this is I would encourage students to cut around the outside edge first. This gives them, there's probably about 3 feet of cutting here that allows them to get some practice. Now these cuts are not as critical as the internal cuts, or the cuts where there's a good piece and a good piece side by side. Here there's waste and then a good piece. So if a student doesn't stay on the line or cuts in a little bit, we can sand that out and nobody will really appreciate that in the end. They won't know about it. But once you get into the inside, it's nice to have your cuts along the line. So what I'm going to do is, one other thing before I move on here. Where did I put it? Now we have a number of what I would call internal cuts. So you need to drill a 16th inch hole so that you can thread the blade through, and like the eyes need it, the nose need it. I am going to actually cut a line for the mouth. We could just paint this on in the end, but we're going to cut a little line. And then the buttons here will need it. Oops, and I think that's about it. Yeah, unless I missed something, the rest we can get. Now, one of the problems with working with younger kids, and I put it too far away. Hang on, I'm going to go get it because it's worth showing. I just am working with this project with 2 grade 7 girls, and this big drill is way too heavy for them. And I didn't realize, because that's what we used when we did theirs, I didn't realize I had these little guys here, and drill bits with a 1/4 inch receiver on them go into here. And it's slow, but it works really good, and it's nice and light. So, and this isn't ideal. I'm just going to drill here. And you want to drill right on the line. At least that's what we've always done. And I'm a little shaky here. Another thing you want to really make sure is that you don't drill into your scroll saw. I wouldn't recommend doing it on the scroll saw. The only reason I'm doing it this way is because of video. And I'm going to drill a little hole at each end of the mouth. And then, this, a lot of times, the hole on the line here doesn't really matter. And a 1/16 of an inch is a little wider than the blade, but with a little bit of rounding the top edge, which I'll show you later in the sanding part, that isn't noticeable in the final product. So anyway, remember to drill the holes. This can be done pretty much at any time. What I would have done is I would have let my students cut this first, and then we would have drilled the holes. Or often what I like to do is to get this into smaller pieces. So one of the common jokes was we'd end up doing one of these, and one of the cuts was simply to cut his head off, which the kids really thought was quite interesting. But here you could cut this part off, and yeah, you could cut along here and cut the head off. And that gives you smaller pieces, but they're still nice sized pieces to work with. But this is only a 16-inch scroll saw, so we're going to have trouble at some point, possibly depending on how things go, with cutting this out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do a little bit of the outside cutting for you, and then we're going to turn the camera off while I finish, and then I'll bring you back for when I'm cutting some of the actual pieces out and doing an internal or two. So here we go. Oh, always important. And a lot of times when I watch scroll saw videos, this hold down is removed. Again, I think if you're working with students, removing a safety item from a saw is not a good idea. So here we go. Boy, I'm kind of sitting in a bad spot here. Okay. Now I'm going to turn and I'm on the line. I actually cut right to the line, was on the line, and then I turned. And this is not a race. Encourage your kids, or when you're learning, just go slow. Watch what you're doing. Let the saw cut. You don't want to force anything. I've got about mid-speed on this saw. I never cut at either low or high speed, kind of in the middle. And the nice thing about these older Delta saws, there isn't any back and forward movement of the blade. I call it oscillation. I don't know if that's the correct term or not, but it allows you to make really, really nice 90-degree corners as the blade's going straight up and down. Okay, well that's kind of the way this goes, and I don't think you're going to learn, oh, okay, well, if I went off the line there, this is an outside cut, so I can back up a little bit and get back on the line. But you don't do that when you're cutting pieces apart, because then you're going to have a gap. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this off camera, and I'm going to bring you back at different parts of the cutting, because otherwise this video gets to be an hour or two long and nobody watches them then. Okay, I'll be back in a bit. Well, I got the outside cut. It was really, really good practice to do that. I haven't done a lot of scroll saw work. I've been organizing it and managing it for students, but I actually, for myself, to get to sit down and cut is fairly rare. But I really found it quite enjoyable. I put a podcast on my TV and away I went. It was fun. So this is kind of a relaxing venture to cut something out on the scroll saw. Okay, there's a few things that I noticed. For instance, when I was cutting, I noticed that the blade was getting dull, so I changed it. It's important when you're working with a group of students. What I always told students about sharpening anything is when it's not cutting like you think it should. If you're having to force things, or if, you know, you can't keep it on line properly, change the blade. That's the very simple thing to do. I would not classify myself as a know-it-all about the scroll saw. We used blades at school with all the teeth pointing down. We usually use number 7s or number 9s. They were tough enough for students, but fine enough to do some accurate work. Uh, this saw that I bought, this is the one I drove down to Kamsack for. Lovely saw, but it had some blades here, and I thought, well, I may as well try them. And this blade has about, well, I'd say about this much of the bottom of the blade. The teeth are pointing up rather than down. So I forget what that blade is called, modified, whatever. But that's something that you can, I think what I'm going to do is do some investigation on the different blades, and I'll maybe shoot a video about blade selection as well. So another issue of, I don't know if controversy, but tension. Having the right pitch or sound. I know nothing about music, but I guess if you were really serious about this, you could probably get your guitar tuner out and do it that way. I'm not recommending it. I'm just kind of joking with it. But when you're cutting, if you're pushing gently and the blade's bending and it's moving around, chances are it's not quite tight enough. So then it would be a good idea to turn it off and tighten it a bit. Now, what I always do when I change blades, I always run the saw empty a little bit, because I find with these Delta blade holders, as they wear, they will sometimes let go if you don't have the blade in it exactly right. So I run it, and then just to make sure it's going to stay in. So I also realized I missed one drill, one internal cut here. So I'm just going to do that quickly. There we go. Got to take the lock off. These things work really good. I'm quite happy with that. Okay, I'm going to start cutting pieces off. Now, it's important when you're starting to do this that you keep track of your pieces. So, and unfortunately you can't see this on the video, but right behind me on my table next to my computer, I have a copy of the pattern. So as I cut pieces off, I'm going to set them on the pattern. And away we go. So I'm going to cut the snow off first. Here it's more important that you try to stay on the line. Now the beautiful thing about this project is it all comes out of one piece. So if you do make a mistake on it, don't go back and fix it. Like, don't back up and then cut on the line, because then you'll have a spot where there's a gap, and that's a problem. But if you go off the line a little bit and then just come back on, it'll all be fine. So anyway, here we go. Now, so far I like this blade. It's a little lighter than what I'm used to using. But it seems to cut really nicely. I actually don't notice a difference in the cutting with those teeth pointing upwards. It cuts the same, but apparently it leaves a smoother back edge. So we'll see how that is after I get this piece cut. Ooh, that cut nice. Yeah, well, it's hard to say. If I had to say it based on one cut, I'd say the bottom where I cut with this blade is a little cleaner than this side where I cut with the other one. But it works good. There's nothing wrong with it. So I'm going to set this piece down on the drawing so I don't lose it. Okay, we're going to cut one more out here. Nope, see there, I'm off the line a wee bit. But just go back. As I mentioned in the video where I bought this saw, The owner at the time said this saw probably didn't have an hour on it. And I believe that because this thing is like a brand new saw. Oh, and I'm not rotating fast enough. I should maybe put a little bit more tension on the blade. Boy, it makes 90s really nice. There we go. Okay, so there's another piece cut out. Set it on my master back here. Okay. One of the things that uh, I'm very familiar with these Delta upper blade holders or lower blade holders. And at the school, because we had so many of these little saws, we had the SS250, these things would wear out and I learned not to trust them. So I'm still trying to regain my trust in these blade holders. So I tend not to tension quite as much as I should, but we're going to change that now because we're going to do an internal cut. So with an internal cut, you take the top blade holder, you loosen it, take your blade out, and let's start at the bottom. And then you gently place the blade in the hole that you drilled. Now, this upper foot or hold down gets in the way of doing this sometimes. One of the things that I see in almost all the scroll saw videos that I've watched is this upper this hold down is removed. And I'm not used to doing things like that because, again, from my school background, and I'm just going to tighten this up just a little bit. Well, you can't get a note. I think I'm going to go a little bit more. That feels pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to cut an internal. Get the blower. That blower is really important. Yeah, I kind of like this blade. Is it far superior to the blades I was using? No, but it cuts nicely. There we go. So now you release it and you got to get it. There we go. And then you pull it out. The other thing that I've noticed, and I did check it on this saw, is to make sure the table was square to the blade. That's important. And I can tell it is because my pieces come out easily. If you're cutting a bit of an angle, your piece won't go out easily one way. Here, let's see if I can push it the other way. Yeah, it's good. So anyway, and these little pieces. So when I did this with students, what I'd have them do is put their initials on the back of each piece. As when you're cleaning up at the end of the day and you find these pieces on the floor, it's really nice to know whose bag to put them in. Okay, so this one's going on my master. And well, this is what I have left to cut. And like I say, this would take a while to do. So I'm not going to have the video that long because there's still a number of steps to do. And I'm just going to turn the camera off now and keep on cutting. And when it's all cut, then we'll move on to the raising. Okay, we'll see you in a bit. Well, the cutting's all done. The next step, well, I did one step off camera. I went to my belt sander and just sanded all the pattern off. But you know, there's a better way to do this. And I never did it in school because it would have taken quite a bit of resources with the number of kids I had. But if you're doing these with small groups or whatever, before you glue your pattern on, take painter's tape and put it over the area where the pattern will go very neatly. Then stick your pattern on. Then you can cut, and the painter's tape, you just grab it and pull it off, and it doesn't leave any residue on the, or very little residue on the pieces. So that is the best way, I think, to do it. I didn't do it this time, and when I taught at school, I didn't do that either, because, like I say, I had lots of students, and that was a lot of tape. So anyway, we're on to the next step now. Now, we're going to radius all the corners of all the pieces. Now, I'm just going to do this by hand. This is 100 grit sandpaper, which works decently. The biggest thing that I had to convince kids not to do was sand the sides. Because when you sand the sides, you change the fit. So I grabbed one of the bigger pieces here to sand because sanding is pretty easy. Now, if you wanted more radiusing, you could take a Dremel with a sanding drum or something like that. But I found that just having students do this by hand led away from the temptation to sand too much, like to make a divot or something on the edge. And a little bit of radius on these pieces seems to improve the look of the fit. It isn't changing the fit at all. It just makes it look a little better, I think. You should try it and see what you think. Okay, and I think I'm getting to the point where I'm happy with the way this is shaped. This is looking, I think that's going to be good. Okay, so that's sanded with 100. I'm just going to knock some of the feathers off the back here, there we go. Okay, it's sanded with 100 now. To prep for paint, all I would do is go over this with 180 grit sandpaper. Go over the whole thing. And that piece is done. I think it'll look really nice when I get that other one done. So, yeah, the sanding's fairly simple. So I'm going to continue now, and I'm going to sand the whole thing. This is going to take me a little while. And then I'll bring you back when it's time to put in the raising units. See you in a bit. And the sanding is done. If you look carefully, you'll see some letters or numbers on the pieces. That's preparing us for the next step, which is raising strategic pieces. Now, I'll talk about that in the next segment, but the sanding's done. It cleans it up nicely, makes it look better, and it's now ready for painting. And we're on to the next part. And the next part is to raise the pieces that I felt needed to be raised in order to make this look a little more 3D. So also this is part of pattern development as well. And I'm starting to, my working copy of the pattern, hopefully you can see it. I'll move it up and down a little bit. Maybe at some point it'll be right. But you can see the RU numbers. The RU stands for raising units. So one raising unit equals 1/8 of an inch, or 3 millimeters if you work in metric. Basically, it's the backer that we use. So I just keep all my scraps. So I've got, this is R1, so R1 is 1/8 inch. R2 is 1/4 inch, so 2 raising units is 1/4 inch. And 3 raising units is 3/8 or 9 millimeters. So there's 3, 6, and 9 millimeters if you're doing this in metric. So I just use the scraps because it's a good way to clean up some of this material. So how do you decide which pieces to raise? Well, that's interesting. What I decided to do, I had done this in the school shop. Sorry, I'm reaching for things that I wasn't prepared for here. When I taught this in the school shop, I wanted my students to have more critical thinking, like where they could, not just follow a pattern, but they could say, okay, what looks better? Which pieces need to be raised? So what I ended up doing is cutting little pieces of the different heights of, so these are a little too big actually, but if there were 4 pieces in here, say 1/4 by 1/4 pieces, and you cut those, and then you put your piece together, and you take a couple of pieces, and you put them underneath, and then you can see what it looks like without committing to anything. So I would have students do that, and then they'd label their pattern. Sometimes they just wrote it on top of the pieces, and then away they went. Normally, in Intarsia, what I've been led to believe over the years is pieces that would appear closer to you when you were looking at the object need to be raised. Now, I blend that a little bit. One of the things I don't like to do is I don't like to have a lot of raising around the outside edge of the piece, because that just leads to a lot of filling later on. And so I try to keep those R1 or R2. Excuse me. So how does a person go about doing this? Well, what I would do is, and I'm going to do one piece for you here, and I hope that you can see this. Boy, this is a big one. This piece is barely long enough, but it's going to work. So what I would do is I would take this and I would draw around the piece with a pencil. But I don't know if you can see that. There's the line. But if I cut along that line, chances are when it's glued on, it's going to stick out on the bottom and make it look like that joint isn't right, because it'll interfere with the fit. So what I do is I just freehand, I draw a line about 1/8. It's not all that important. And oh, there I'm a little close. Okay, see that? the inside line is what I'm going to cut. So I'm going to move over to the saw. I'm going to see if I can just turn the camera. This is so many setups if I change this. So we'll see what goes on here. And we won't get the best view of the saw today, but this isn't that important. Okay, so I'm going to quickly cut this. I sure hope you can see this because this isn't planned as well as it should be. So remember, I'm cutting the inside line. There we go. Cutting neatness isn't that important here because nobody's going to ever see this. It's just to hold the piece up. Okay? All right. I thought I'd bring you in a little closer for this. So here's the back of my piece. There's the R1 on it, or 1RU on it. And so what I want when I glue this on is I don't want any part of the raising piece sticking over the edge of the real piece, because now this will touch here like it's supposed to. This is really quite simple to put on. Just take a little bit of yellow glue. The little spring clamps that you get, I know often Home Depot sells them in a bag, work really good. But there is another way when you run out of clamps. Just put the glue on and rub it back and forth until it sets in place. That is referred to as a rub joint. At least I refer to it that way. Okay, now you're going to have a little more filling to do at the very bottom here. So I slid the piece down a little bit. I don't know how much you can see of that transition there, but I can see it nicely from my vantage point, and it looks really good. But I have lots of clamps, so I'm going to put some on. Now you really have to watch when you clamp these, because like I rubbed this a little bit, the glue is a bit tacky already, mine's staying in position fairly well. But if you have glue under there, your students have maybe a bit too much glue like they often do, and it's going to slide around a lot. So encourage them to put the clamps on and then check all the way around to make sure it's good. And that's one piece with one raising unit on it. This will go fairly fast. The cutting isn't that important. And I've learned over the years that with students, especially younger ones, keeping the raising somewhat limited is good. But if you're an adult doing these and you see you want more 3D, at the school shop we had up to 5 raising units. So I had 5/8 material that we sometimes use. So okay, that's that. So what I'm going to do off camera is I'm going to finish off all the raising, and then the next thing we're going to do is put a coat of paint on this. We are getting close to being done. Well, the raising's all done, and the sanding's done as well. So the next step is paint. And the colors, I've kind of got a rough palette that I went through, and I've got written down kind of in a, I don't know, it's a best guess right now. So we'll see how it works out when we get there. So my plan is also a work in progress. And I'll just bring it over here. You can see how I've written things in pencil, and eventually I will clean this all up. We'll add all that information to the plan, and then it'll go up on Teacher Pay Teacher. So, okay, well, the next step is painting. And this is a first coat, but it's all very important that with the first coat, and since I've been working on this piece for the camera all the way along, we're going to change pace here, and I'm going to take this piece. So the lower body part. So when you're painting, it's very important that you get these edges painted really good, because once these pieces are together, those edges are really difficult to paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm using Dollar Tree paint here, but Dollarama is kind of the same thing. It's just this is what I had here. And I just use, you're not going to see this, but I just put some on some scrap piece. So here, I can show you that. I use my wood scraps for this. And then I am going to take my paint, and I'm going to paint the edge. This piece, as you can tell, is white. It's just stating the obvious. So yeah, you need to get in and get those edges done really well, because they are going to be difficult to do later. You'll end up contaminating the color next to it. Now the last coat of paint, that'll be done when this thing is all together. It's on the backer board permanently. It's been filled and sanded, and then we'll do the outer edge one more time because it will need it. And then a person can just carefully touch up or repaint the tops. When I get there, we'll explain it then, or you'll see it then. Okay, so now I'm just going to, and I'm using Dollarama brushes here. The reason I use Dollarama brushes is because, as happened to me with my last class, I was in a hurry after class, and I didn't double check the brushes, and they were stiff. So yeah, when you're working with younger kids, cheap supplies are good, because they often don't clean brushes like they should, and sometimes it's a good thing to have the dried brushes in the brush holder for the next class, and then they realize, oh shoot, I forgot to do that. So anyway, that piece, I'm just going to set it on here. That piece has first coat on it. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to, there's no point in you watching me paint all of them, because you know how each piece is done now. So I'm going to start painting the rest. And when the painting is done, the next step, once the painting is done, is to glue it onto the backer board, which is a piece of 1/8" hardboard, which I have under here. So that's what's going to happen next. So with all that said and done, we're going to move on to the next thing. Well, the painting's done, and we're ready to apply it or stick it onto the backer board. The backer board is just 1/8 inch tempered hardboard, but it has a painted back to it. So I put the painted side down. So in the end, when it's all finished, you've got a finished back as well. So now I need to attach this to this backer board. And this is a little tougher than it looks. So to get everything to fit properly, again, after painting can be a little bit of a challenge. I see a few places here where I'm going to have to work a little bit to get it to fit. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that when I'm gluing things together, that I don't end up with a piece that's hanging off the backer board. That is a common problem. So I've got it together. It's in the center. I'm going to just slide these pieces off to the side, and I'm going to draw a line here. I'm going to move this up, and I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to put this center body piece in first. That's probably enough for me to landmark it. Now the buttons and the gloves, they fit tight enough now with paint on that I'm going to leave them in and glue them in as one piece. So first of all, you want to put some yellow glue on. I don't brush this out. Because it just flattens when you push it on. And then a few drops of hot glue. You want to put the hot glue on last because you have to work quite quickly. So I'm going to try to get this in where it was. There we go. Now I have a piece, and I didn't quite hit it, but I think I'm going to be okay. I should have come over this way a little bit more on the bottom. But yeah, this is a little tricky to get started. You want to make sure you're on the right path. So I'm going to put a couple pieces in here so that you can see kind of what's going on. Again, it's the yellow glue that holds. The hot glue is just a clown. And you have to get it on as quickly as possible because otherwise the hot glue will just make a clump and cause problems. So that's looking quite nice. I see the bottom worked out good. Okay, and we're going to give it a bit more glue here. I may be putting on a tad much hot glue, but everything's working. Okay, and that's basically all there is to it. You just keep going. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break. You've seen this now. I'm going to set some things together because this is going to take me a bit more time, but it's basically the same thing of getting it to fit and moving on. So I'm going to work off camera a little bit more, and I'll bring you back maybe for the last few pieces. Well, I got it all glued on. I was going to bring you back and show you a little bit as I got towards the end here, but I had a little trouble with the fit on the lower part of the candy cane. I had to get the Dremel out and with a sanding drum on it and take a little bit off one piece to make it fit. And then I actually had to add on to another piece. And I could have just recut it, but I just took some, it's a Varathane product. It's like auto body filler. It's a quick epoxy-based wood filler that I use, and I just built the piece up with it and sanded it and painted it, and it's all good. But sometimes it just happens, and I'm not sure why this happened, but I dealt with it, and when you do things, you might just have to deal with some things as well. So just be aware. So now we're going to cut around the object. I think I'm going to set my saw at a 20-degree angle. I like back cutting underneath, but there's going to be a couple places where I may not be able to. In here, I don't think I'll be able to. And in there, I'm going to have to drill a hole and pop the blade through. So I think I'll just do it straight there. But that's about all there. And then we're going to fill that edge and sand it and finish painting and put a hanger on and we're done. So I'm going to bring you in closer. I'm going to turn my saw table to 20 degrees and then we're going to cut the backer off. All right, I'm in position. I'm not even sure what angle the table's set at. It looks about right to me. It doesn't seem like there's any markings on this saw, which is a little unusual. I probably just didn't look carefully enough. This saw is relatively new to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut along this edge here. I'm going to cut this bottom off and then I'll show you. Okay, so here we go. Okay, can you see that? And the nice thing about cutting along, you get very little scraping. Mind you, that doesn't really matter that much because we're going to fill this all anyway and it's going to get sanded and painted. So I'm just going to continue doing that. Now on this saw, the table tilts only with the left side down. Other saws turn the other way. What's usually important is to have the bulk of your pieces or your piece on the lower side of the blade because that gives you the right angle here to cut. If you're cutting on this side, the blade's going to cut the top, which is bad. You don't want to do that. Okay, let's go at it again. Well, there it is. It's mostly done. It cut fairly nicely. Had a little trouble with the blower falling off, but we'll fix that. And I have to go in and do in here yet, and I'll drill a hole and go in there. But overall, it looks pretty good. A little bit of finish sanding and filling on the edges, and it's going to be great. So I will bring you back for that. Well, I've got the table set flat now, and we're just going to cut in here. When you cut with the table square to the blade, then you can rub the blade along the edge. And you are going to damage your paint a little bit, but that doesn't matter. You're going to be repainting this anyway. Just gently rubbing. Hard to see. Oh, there, I took the figure off a little bit. Okay. One of the bad things about the way I designed it is this candy cane is going to be a bit fragile. Maybe what I'll do is once it's all done, give it a dab of hot glue and hot glue it to Snowman's head. Okay, I think we got it. See, this is going to be a little weak, but it's so close here that if I just sneak a little bit of hot glue in the back there, it'll hold it to the head and then it'll be stable. There we go. Okay, I've got a hole to drill here, right in there. I don't think I'm going to show you me cutting that. This is going to be long enough as it is, so we're going to turn the camera off. I'm going to cut that out, and then I'm going to bring you back for the filling. Well, the filling's going along just fine. I thought rather than start at the very beginning when I started and show you a little clip of that, I waited till the end. This is just Drydex, can't read what it is. Anyway, that's a spackling compound, I guess. Can't seem to see a whole lot. This is the stuff that it's pink when it goes on, and when it's dry, it's ready to sand, it's white. So it looks a little odd at first, and I cover everything. So basically what I'm doing is I'm covering up the joint between the backer board and the pieces. That's basically what this is. And then this all gets sanded smooth, and then it'll get painted. So it'll get painted where, say, this is a white piece here, while on the side here, it'll be white, okay? So the whole idea is to make it look like it's made from one piece. So I don't have much of this to do. I should have maybe saved more for you but to look at, but this is pretty straightforward, pretty basic. And it's better to have too much on than too little, because this takes a while to dry. So now I'm just going to go look around, touch up. There's a couple places I've missed a spot. Oh, there I missed the spot. You can use a little plastic knife or any other applicator tool for this. I just found it easier to use my pinky. There. And that's it. So now it's got to dry and it'll all turn white. I'll sand it nice and smooth and even and then paint down to the very back edge. Like we're going to paint this all the way down to the very back edge so there's till we touch the white. And it'll look really, really complete. Okay, so there we go. We're getting close. It's taken some time, but we'll sand next, and then we'll finish painting and hanger, and then we're done. Okay, well, it's done. We'll start at the back. Notice that that white backer board really makes it look more finished. There's a sawtooth hanger on there, and notice the edges are painted the same as the piece, and it wraps around really nicely. So it gives it the appearance that this is all one piece, which is what we want in the end. Some of the extra highlights, my wife is an artist, and she did the final paint on this, and that's why it looks a lot better than if I would have done it. But that's up to you. You can be as talented with paint as you want, and these things always look really nice. So yeah, it's done. So let's close this video off and move on. Well, I hope you found that helpful. Those explanation videos always get a little bit longer, but sometimes it just takes a while to explain things properly. So what are we going to do with Frosty here? I'm just going to call him Frosty for no particular reason. Him or her, doesn't matter. Well, we're at about 335 subscribers. I would have liked to have gotten to 1,000 in this first year. With my goal is to have 100 videos in my first year, and we're on track for that. So what we're going to do is this is going to be the 500 subscriber giveaway. So how do you register for this? So send me in the comments, say, I want Frosty. Just I want Frosty, and what we'll do is I'll keep a list of all the people that have replied to that, and when this channel hits 500 subscribers, I'll do a draw on air. Like we'll do a video so people know it's not rigged, and then we will get this to whoever's name I pick. Now, right now, we're in a postal strike here in Canada, so mailing things will be tough. But unless there's a real shot in the arm because of Frosty here, it'll probably be a while. And I'm assuming the strike will be over by the time I make the draw. So, man, it would be cool to have to pop this in the mail and send it a fair distance away. Let's put it that way. So just remember to make a comment saying I want Frosty, and I'll put your name in a draw for that. So with that brings this video to an end. Hopefully things went well in this video, that you can learn how to do this. It's a great project, especially if you're working with kids. And I don't know, I've had other adults look at this project and they love it. So this would be a great starter scroll saw project if you want to get into working with scroll saws. And apparently I am. So this is a great project. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Share my channel with your friends. Boy, it'd be nice if by Christmas I could be at 500 subscribers, but that would be a lot. So anyway, like I said, thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe, and have an awesome rest of the week. We will see you on the weekend.